Hello, everyone. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here to present two of the finest spiritual teachers of our time, Neale Donald Walsch and Thomas W. Campbell. Neale is a New York Times bestselling author who has written over 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. He published Conversations with God in 1995, and it was a worldwide sensation. So congratulations, Neale, on his 30th anniversary. He
Thank
wrote
you.
many, oh yes, of course. He wrote many subsequent volumes of Conversations with God. His books have been translated into 37 languages. Neale received much positive feedback and gratitude from around the world for his books because from the comments, God became personal to people. What a wonderful gift to the world. Tom's My Big Toe trilogy is an all-encompassing scientific theory of everything. It's a model of reality that represents a big picture perspective that unites the objective and subjective worlds of mind and matter, physics and metaphysics, normal and paranormal, secular and religious, that leads to both a better, more comprehensive physics and a more peaceful, giving, and loving approach to life. Published in 2003, My Big Toe changed countless lives by putting everything in a cohesive, logically derived big picture. My Big Toe is available in German, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, with several other languages currently in the works. Now, through the centuries, messages for humanity have never stopped. All you need to do is remember them, remember who you are, and seek answers in your own unique way. Neale and Tom hope to help you do just that by sharing their experiences, insights, and experiments in consciousness, but more importantly, by highlighting their communication methods with that one aware, intelligent consciousness being many call God. Both Tom and Neale questioned the beliefs and culture they grew up with. Neale has said that we advance in our understanding in everything but theology. He has studied several religions and felt there needed to be more answers. His passion for understanding was so great that he received answers in his own unique way, directly from God. Tom, at a very young age, was extremely intuitive, yet in his early teen years, he leaned towards atheism and questioned everything. As a physicist, he wanted answers to questions. How does this reality work? There was not much culture could offer at that time. The answers must be found elsewhere. In his quest for these answers, while studying for his PhD in physics, he was reunited with meditation and exploring consciousness, which led him to unexpectedly discover and show evidence for God's existence. Now, you both have strong insights and theories regarding our purpose here on this earth. I would like to start with a wonderful insight and use of literature Neale wrote in a blog post in 2016. Neale, we share a love of Shakespeare. He was a metaphysician of the first rank, you wrote. I so agree. I always felt Shakespeare's insights into human nature were fueled not only by his keen observations and intricate details of local country life and court life, but that they were enhanced by intuition, perhaps nudged by a higher power. And this is evident to me in some manner in everything he wrote. You titled your blog, Once More into the Breach, Dear Friends, Once More, from Shakespeare's Henry V, where you referenced the daily struggles of life. What is the point, you stated, suggesting what is our purpose here? You've also said in your books that this spiritual journey takes courage. It's for the brave, not the timid. This is also true from Tom's MBT viewpoint because in his theory, it is the individual's responsibility to improve the quality of their consciousness. Whether the readers were familiar with the reference to Henry V's speech or not, this quote must have inspired and helped others understand there is so much more potential for our lives when you remember who you really are, and all you need do is have courage to take up arms against this sea of daily troubles. I have here your slightly abbreviated ever so minimally modified version of Henry V's speech meant to rouse his soldiers' courage at Agincourt. Your goal in using this quote was to inspire those who are challenged in everyday modern life. Would you kindly read it for us, Neale? I've passed it on to you just a few minutes ago, so I thank you. And could you comment on solving the struggles of life and your philosophy of purpose here?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for the request. Here is the quotation to which you refer. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of life's struggles blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath. Bend up every spirit to its full height. On, you noblest one. Show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding. For there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble luster in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game is afoot. Follow your spirit.
Thank you, Neale. Beautifully read.
Wow, that was very, very good.
Please comment on how you use this and how you received feedback from it and what you find our purpose to be here. And Tom, follow Neale's comments when he's through with your scientific view of purpose from your My Big Toe theory.
I guess I would begin by saying that, of course, I asked God when I had my conversation with God, what is this all about? Why are we here? What's the point of it all? I'd like to just digress for 1 second, if I might, Donna, and say that all of us are having conversations with God all the time. I don't want people to think for 1 minute that I imagine myself to be the guy who talks to God. Wouldn't it be great if everybody could do it, but only I can do it? Or I'm one of the few, maybe the Pope, perhaps, who knows, the Archbishop of Canterbury, maybe the Chief Ulama, the head rabbi, whoever. Actually, I'm told in my experience of conversations with God that all of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling them something else to avoid being ridiculed or made fun of. So we don't walk around saying, yeah, I talked to God this morning and here's what he said to me. We call our conversations with God by other names, women's intuition, or a psychic hit, or I had an epiphany, or a brilliant idea struck me while I was standing in the shower, or whatever, whatever words we can use that allow us to get away with expressing what has been given to us and brought through us, which happens to all of us. Every single person I've talked to in the past 30 years has shared with me moments in their life when they feel that they too were inspired. I guess the difference between me and some of the other folks is that I actually took notes. I actually wrote down what I was hearing, and that was my training as a reporter. Donna, I spent years of my life in the news business. First, I was a radio station news director, and I was out there gathering news and taking notes and reporting on what I was observing, what I was witnessing. Then, and after about 8 years of doing that, I wound up being a print media reporter, starting off as a beat reporter for a local newspaper in Maryland, and then ultimately becoming the managing editor of a weekly newspaper. My point being is that I spent a huge portion of my life, not a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but about 25 or 30 years in the reporting business. So it was really natural for me to write down whatever I was hearing, especially if I thought it was important for me to remember. So I took notes on everything that I was hearing in my mind. Then I heard, see, I wasn't trying to write a book, by the way. I wasn't taking these notes in order to produce a book. I was taking these notes simply to have a personal record of what I want to use the word receiving, what I was receiving in this process. But Donna, interestingly enough, as part of the process, I was told this: Neale, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And you know what I thought, Donna? I thought, yeah, now I gotcha. Now I gotcha. Because if this is my imagination, that's not going to happen. No publisher is going to put out a book because a guy claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. So I actually sent Xerox copies of my handwritten notes to a couple of publishing companies. I didn't send it off to 15 or 20 publishers, but I sent it off, I think, to 2 or 3 publishers. And, just to see what would happen, because I was daring God. Show me. You said it's going to be, one day become a book that's accessible, accessed by many people. We'll see about that. Well, you know what? I got a call 2.5 or so weeks later. And this man says, Mr. Walsh, I'm with Hampton Roads Publishing Company. We want to publish your book. I said, you're kidding me. Really? And he said, no, really. He said, it's a great work of fiction.
Oh.
We think it'll find many readers. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You're not publishing it as a book of fiction. And the guy on the other end of the phone said, Mr. Walsh, are you trying to tell me that you think this really happened to you? We thought it was a great fictional account, a fictional story of a guy who has an argument with God. I said, excuse me, this is my lived experience. You will not publish it as a work of fiction. He said, well, okay, don't get upset. We'll put it out as a nonfiction book, but you're not going to find 500 readers because, people aren't going to rush to the store to buy a book because some guy up in Oregon claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. You'll be lucky if you find 500 readers, but we find it interesting enough, we'll put the book out as a nonfiction item. And he was right. That publisher was absolutely correct. The book did not find 500 readers. It found 5 million in 37 languages, published all over the world.
Incredible. In
Russia, in China, in Turkey, in Yugoslavia, in Romania, all over the world. I'm not bragging about it, I'm just saying what happened. So then I said, okay, God, I get it. This is really occurring. This is really what's happening. In the meantime, the process continued, and I began getting calls from the major publishers in New York. The first book, as I mentioned, was published by a very small publishing house. They put out maybe 4 or 5 titles a year. Just a small little publishing house on the East Coast of the United States. But then they turned around and sold the book to a major publishing house, the Putnam folks in New York. And I started getting calls from many New York publishers asking me, do you have any sisters like that at home? And I said, well, the process has continued. If you're interested in more of this material, the process continues in my life. And the folks at Putnam said, send us whatever you have. So I did. I continued to send them my notes. I wound up typing them out for them for easier reading. The first set that I sent to Hampton Roads was actually my handwritten notes in a Xerox copy. But then I began to type out my notes, and I sent them to Putnam, and they put out what turned into Conversations with God books 2 and 3. And since then, the process has continued. Again, I know this sounds like a big boast. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you what happened. And ultimately, 9 dialogue books were produced, covering roughly 3,000 pages of back and forth, questions and answers, questions and answers, questions and answers about every topic I could conceive of. Parenting, right livelihood, diets, exercise, human sexuality, relationships, every topic I could imagine that I had a question on. And of course, like most people, I had a lot of questions. And, when you've got God on the other line, on the other end of the phone, so to speak, you start asking every question you ever had, including, of course, what's the point of this? What in heaven's name, literally what in heaven's name is the point of this? What am I supposed to be doing here? And importantly, what happens when I leave? I want all the answers. Give me all the answers. So God said, okay, take this stuff down. And I did. And that, as I mentioned a minute ago, produced those 3,000 pages covering 9 books.
He knew what he was doing, a good reporter that you are. He would take down all the notes.
Yeah, she said to me, because I said, why me? Why did you choose me? And she said, well, Lynda, it's not just you. As I mentioned earlier, I talk to all people all the time. But one of the reasons that you were chosen as part of this process to make it so public is because you understood. You understood how to do a good job of reporting. And we knew we could depend on you to not only take good notes, but to turn it into something that was readable for the average person. Of course, I didn't change. This is what's interesting. Talk about turning into something that's readable, and then I'll finally shut up, because if you're not careful, I'll take up the entire program. but I'll end my little diatribe here by saying that I didn't change a single word of what I was given in this dialogue. What I experienced as the voice of God speaking to me was very clear, and I didn't change one single word, even though some of it, included statements that contradicted, directly violated everything I've been taught in my life about God, about heaven, what happens after we die, who we are. I mean, I had a whole background of information on these kinds of questions. It's not like I didn't have any previous experience asking questions like this. I was born and raised in the Roman Catholic faith, and my parents sent me to a Roman Catholic elementary school. So I was filled with Catholic doctrine about all of this. And virtually every other statement that I was receiving in this conversation directly contradicted, if not outwardly violated, what I was told in my Catholic elementary school. So, of course, to give you a couple of quick examples, and then I will shut up. But the most amazing example was God said to me, Neale, there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as hell. There's no such person as the devil or Satan. You made all of that stuff up. It's simply not part of ultimate reality. I do not condemn, I do not punish anyone. My love for you is unconditional and requires nothing in return. Our relationship is not transactional. You do this for me and I'll do this for you. No, it's not a transaction. I know that you think, Neale, in your life, that love should be a transaction. That's why you've had one failed marriage after another, because you haven't understood that love is not a transaction. It's an outward giving, expecting, requiring, and demanding nothing in return. And that's, Neale, how I love you. And so I said, okay, fair enough. It's the kind of God I always wanted to believe in, but I couldn't believe in it because my faith would not allow me to believe in that kind of a God. My faith told me that God was judgmental, condemning, and punishing. So I wrote what I was told, and it catch the attention of one or two folks around the world.
What was your most startling revelation as far as our purpose here?
That it had nothing to do with anything that I was doing. It had nothing to do with my job, my career, my parenting, my relationship interactions, my sexuality. It had nothing to do with what I was doing in my life. It had everything to do with what I was being. And God said to me, Neale, that's why you're called human beings. You're not called human doings. You think that you're a human doing, but you're a human being. And every moment of your life is an opportunity to complete the agenda of your soul. So I said to God, okay, what's the agenda? Help me out here. And she said, Neale, it's really quite simple. Your agenda is to use your experience in the realm of the physical, which is a contextual field, where everything exists, including what you are and what you are not. And because what you are not also exists in your contextual field, you can then know what you are, not just mentally, not just conceptually, but experientially. So the agenda of your soul is to experience through the demonstration thereof your true identity. And I said to God, and what would that be exactly? And he said, Neale, you are an individuation of divinity. You get to decide from moment to moment what you choose your identity to be. That's what life is about. You get to make your choice and make your decision. Then you get to experience that. But I have one thing to say to you, Neale. Listen to me carefully. Your life has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you realize that, when you live into that, you experience that in a universal sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. Neale, there's only one of us in the room. There's nobody else here. All things are one thing. There is only one thing in existence, and all things are part of the one thing there is. But you've been denying the part of me which you are. You've been denying it all of your life, as have most of your fellow human beings. So, Neale, stop it. Stop denying who you really are.
Oh, Neale, you have so much in common with a physicist and a theory of everything. Tom, what would your comments be on what Neale has told you?
Neale is a very beautiful speaker. I've enjoyed every word of it. Well said, well said. And it matches word for word identically with the conclusions that I came to. There's not a piece of what Neale said that isn't exactly what I've been saying, but we come to it from very opposite directions. And that's good because we need lots of different viewpoints and lots of different directions because there's lots of different people. Some of them will pick up on one thing and some it takes another. And we would like to connect with all of them. Yeah, but as Neale talked, I was kind of ticking off the points. Yep, 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 check. And even some of the words were the same. An individuated unit of consciousness, I say. And to me, the larger consciousness system is God. So it's all consciousness. Consciousness is the same as soul or spirit. And I started, I started when I was very young and I had entities come to me and take me out of body and show me a bit around the world of consciousness. And that lasted for a year or so. And then they buttoned up my entry into the non-physical and said, Tom, we don't want you to grow up too weird. We have plans for you, and you need to grow up like a normal kid. So I didn't like being shut out, but by that time I was able to go out of body on my own and do the things I wanted to do. And they put me in a training course, training me to work and function within the non-physical realm of consciousness. Now, I say non-physical, consciousness is what is. That's what's fundamental. It's actually the non-physical world of the physical. But that's a little confusing, so we'll get to that later. But then I kind of let that go. I had always had non-physical mentors, or as I would learn later to call them guides, that I could count on when I really got to a point that I didn't understand the direction of forward, which way was forward and which way was backward. I could talk to them, and I always got a very good and very useful answer. So I trusted them implicitly. And as it turned out, these guides that I was talking to were the same individuals who had gotten me out of body, same individuals who I ended up talking with later. They've been part of my world for a long time. Started around 6, 7 years old and still there now. I'm going on 81. So it's been a long association with these non-physical friends of mine. Anyway, then I ran into a little course on transcendental meditation when I was in graduate school. And it promised that you could get by with less sleep if you learn to meditate. And I was working a big Van de Graaff accelerator trying to do nuclear physics research, and getting by with less sleep was a real important thing to me at that time. When that machine was running, you kept taking data, even if it means you stayed up a couple of days in a row, because it didn't always run. And when it broke, well, then all the research stopped until it got fixed again. So I was meditating one day and just casually was thinking about the software that I had written and why it had bombed. In those days, there was no easy way to find out why your software bombed except run it again and make a lot of print statements so you knew about where it happened. That was the bad old days of punch cards. And I could find the cards. I was shown the cards that had errors on them, even if it was a key punch error. In other words, the hole in the card was 1/10 of a millimeter too far to the right or left. So that opened my mind again in the last stages of my research and working on my PhD. And I realized that there was another whole part of reality that I knew existed, and it was in the realm of consciousness. And it was important. And you could do things with it. You could debug your software with it and lots of other things I suspected. So as a physicist, what I do is model reality. That's what physics does. Now I found out when I was almost out of school that there was a whole lot more to reality than I had ever imagined. In another 3 or 4 or 5 months after that, I was introduced to Bob Monroe. Bob Monroe has just built a lab for studying consciousness. I started going out to Bob's, starting learning again how to go out of body, and it was a very easy learn this time. And for the next 7.5 to 8 years, I spent 15 to 20 hours a week with Bob Monroe, learning about the larger consciousness system, doing research, change a variable, and see how that affected your ability to remote view or heal. Because we practiced all the evidential things that you could do with your mind, like healing and remote viewing, mind-to-mind connection, talking to dead people, talking to other entities that had never been here in a body. Just, anyway, exploring, going to other reality frames other than this one. So I spent all that time doing that, and I did research for the next 33 years until I thought I understood consciousness, and then I wrote the trilogy. and it's about 1,000 pages. I also never started to write a book. Neale's story sounds a lot like mine, just put in a totally different context. I thought I was just write down what it is that I thought reality was about and consciousness was about. And my first go at it was 8.5 pages, and I thought I was done. And I handed it to people, and they looked at it and they rolled their eyes and said, "This doesn't make any sense." So I added some to it so it would make more sense, and added some to it. And then I'd pass it out to other people and say, "What do you think?" And they'd say, "Well, I just don't get this part. And what about this other part?" So I'd add more to it and add more to it. And eventually, you do that for about 5 years, and I ended up with so much stuff it wasn't possibly going to fit in a single book. So I rearranged it into 3 books and put it out as my big tome. Now, at that time, I knew that consciousness was fundamental. That was clear. And I had learned, we talk about conversations with God and that the larger consciousness system is God. I hadn't gotten to that point quite yet. But it was interesting that as I grew up, as I did these paranormal things, my reality grew. And as your reality grows and your understanding grows, you find that you are a tiny little speck in a very large system, though a highly valued speck. And yes, indeed, you are part of that consciousness system. You're a piece of it. We are all one. And then as I progressed, now this was in the earlier stages out in when I was still with Monroe, I had this, as a physicist, I had this idea that if you can't measure it, it either doesn't exist, or if it does, it isn't important. And of course, that got left. And then I was just kind of agnostic. And then I realized that all the things that I had learned while out of body and studying consciousness were all the things that religion had been saying for the last 2,000 years. And I had to laugh at myself finally coming to the point that, hey, all those guys I made fun of, they were right. And the things they said, they were fundamentally correct too. Now, all the dogma, no, but all the basic fundamental ideas, God is love. We're here to care about each other, to work together, to cooperate, to care, to have empathy for, to love. And indeed, that statement that I think it was Paul wrote in one of the letters to the Corinthians, he said, God is love. And there it was. That is the summary in 3 words of what I learned about the larger consciousness system. But as I put this system together, I had to do it logically because I'm a scientist and that's what I have to do. So I took all my knowledge in consciousness, knew that consciousness was fundamental, knew all about how the paranormal things worked, and I understood the mechanism by which this consciousness system evolved. I could start with a single cell of consciousness that I defined consciousness as awareness with a choice. It's a very simple definition, but it has a lot of logical implications. And from that simple thing of an awareness that can realize you're going to be one of 2 states, a 1 or a 0 or a A or a B, whatever, I was able to derive the nature of this larger consciousness system, the nature of us, who we were, how we got to be here, the nature of our reality. What was this physical universe and how did it come about? And in the process of understanding all of that, of course, I found out who we were, why we were here, what we were supposed to do. And of course, it's exactly the same as what Neale just told us a little while ago. His speech was much more eloquent than mine. We come to the same conclusions and the same understanding about the nature of reality. And as I went through this process, I realized that my ego was falling away. My understanding was deepening. I was more caring about others. I stopped trying to control my life. I stopped trying to control others. I realized that If I were able to actually have my way and control things, all I would do is screw everything up. It wouldn't have been any help at all. It would have been something less than what would happen if you just let things unfold. If you just love, you take what happens and you try your best to make low entropy choices, and that can translate as choices that are love-based. You make love-based choices, and then you let things just go. And your only requirement is to do your best to be love. And again, it's nothing to do with behavior. It's about being. You can act kind all you like, but it doesn't win you any points. You have to be kind in order to evolve your consciousness. Consciousness evolves toward becoming love. And the opposite of love is fear. And ego and beliefs are a subset of fear. Fear creates the ego and beliefs. So you get rid of all your beliefs. You just be, take responsibility for everything. No, George doesn't make you angry by what he said. You have to take responsibility for being angry. Your choice to be angry. So you take responsibility and you live your life one choice at a time, trying to be love. That is, lowering the entropy or being positive and helpful to not only the system, God, but also to everyone else. So you have to lower that entropy for yourself and for the system all at the same time. And we're here having experience. As Neale said, we're here to experience in this virtual reality, which is created, or we should say rendered, by the larger consciousness system, which is God. So who are we? We're pieces of consciousness. Pieces of consciousness playing human avatars. And we're just a piece of that larger consciousness system. And my model says why those pieces had to be created. It even explains this transition that Neale mentioned between the Old Testament, where you have an angry and jealous God, to the New Testament, where God is love, and you turn the other cheek and you do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. It explains how that transition happened, why it happened. So the advantage in coming to it from the direction that I came to it is that the model that I came up with, and it's a model of metaphors, the model I came up with, model of consciousness, model of reality, it answers all of the paradoxes, both in science and in theology and in metaphysics. So all these things that we didn't understand before, like why, when you dig down to the very bottom of reality, you don't find particles, you find probability. And my model says, why? You have to find probability. And a big puzzle in physics was, what does it mean that the probability wave collapses to a particle? That doesn't make any sense. A probability wave is a piece of mathematics. How does a piece of mathematics collapse to a physical particle? Well, it doesn't. That's not what happens at all. But my model gives an explanation for what actually does happen and why probability is there. It tells why the speed of light's a constant and why that constant speed of light actually changes in the eighth or ninth decimal place. It has like 4 or 5 times that we've been able to measure it accurately enough, and why it does that. And a lot of other things, a lot of other paradoxes. And it produces a science of the subjective world as well as the science of an objective world. So it's a better physics, a more general physics. And I expect in another 5 to 10 years, physicists will adopt this as a better, more general physics. And that, to me, is very important, because the fundamental concept that is part of our culture, it's not that people are taught this, they just grow up knowing that it's true. And that is that reality is physical. It's this physical world. That's it. That's our reality. And with a belief in a physical world as being fundamental, there's an ethic that comes along with that. In a physical world, the stuff is out there. It's just your environment. You can grab as much of it as you can defend, hold it, sell it to others, rent it, can do whatever you want with it because it's just there for people to grab and control and sell and make profit on. So that boils down to an ethic of control, power, force. You have to be able to control what's out there. You have to do that with power and with force. So if you grab a part of the resources and say, these are mine, now if you want some of those, I'll sell them to you. Well, that takes not only control, but power and force. And look at our world today, and you'll see that this ethic of control, power, force is what's at the root of all of our dysfunction. Well, that ethic comes with a belief in a material reality. So people look at this control, power, force structure, and they say, well, the people who are smart and rich and they're on top and others are down at the bottom, and 5% of the people own 95% of the resources. And they look at that and they say, well, that's just natural. That's just the way the world is. The strong and the mighty and the lucky and the smart end up on top and everybody else ends up on the bottom. And it's a natural way of things. It is not the natural way of things. That is very dysfunctional. The world is not based in a physical world. This is a world based in consciousness. It's a world based in mind. And from Neale's viewpoint, it's a world based in God, based in understanding spirituality, understanding soul. Soul and spirit and consciousness are all the same thing. It's that thing that animates us as humans, that thing inside that makes all our choices. So what are we here for? We're here to make choices. And by the quality of those choices, we evolve or de-evolve the quality of our consciousness. And we're part of the larger conscious system strategy to evolve itself because it's still evolving. It's not a done thing. Evolution is always open-ended. It has evolved, and we are still in that process. So we make choices, everyday choices, thousands of them. And if these choices are based on love and caring, not just for yourself, not just for the larger system, but for everything, the larger system, yourself, and everybody else that you influence or that you connect with, you optimize that love, that lowering of entropy. That's why we're here. So it kind of ends up with a lot of the same conclusions. It is more on a science track and a philosophical track. But I have found out one of the things I have learned on this adventure that I was on is that the larger consciousness system, of course, wants us to succeed. As we lower our entropy, its entropy is lowered too because we're part of it. Now, it has then a good reason, a good motive for trying to help us succeed. It wants us to succeed. And when it finds somebody like Neale, who has the right kind of skills and the right kind of attitude and the right kind of open-mindedness, then it uses that person to help get its message across. And it does this in many, many ways. People are selected, picked. Sometimes it's one of those dark nights of the soul, where they go out into the field and say, help me, I'm at the end of my rope. And, I can't go on living this way. And then suddenly they'll get a bigger picture and they'll see that all that trouble that they've had and all that misery has been created by themselves and their own attitude and their own beliefs and their own ego, their own fear. And they go up, and sometimes then the larger conscious system stays with them and turns them into teachers, spiritual teachers, because they've been there at that bottom and they understand how you get there. You get there through fear, through making poor choices. Instead of saying, how can I help? What can I do? You say, what's in it for me? And that's the wrong thing. What's in it for me takes you to de-evolution, not evolution. And it does a lot of other things too. Lots of people who get started on a spiritual path It's because they have some sort of experience that is unexplainable, some sort of experience that they know is real, that happened to them. That's not in question, but it's unexplainable. So they go to the internet and say, does anybody else ever had their dead mother, call them on the phone 10 days later? And they find out that, yeah, that's happened quite a few times. And they start opening up their mind and they become what I call seekers. And these seekers read and think and meditate and learn. And that is a kind of a wave that's happening now. We are seeing a big, big interest in consciousness these days. When I published my books, there was me and maybe two other people in the universe that thought us being a piece of consciousness was a good idea and that this was a virtual reality, and understanding consciousness in terms of being the children of God, the subsets of the larger consciousness system. But now that's not the case. Now, I published a physics paper in a peer-reviewed physics journal, and it was all about trying to help understand the simulation hypothesis. So this idea that we live in a simulation is a part of physics now. There's a lot of physicists who see that as an answer, but they just don't know how or why. They can't wrap their head around it because their experiments have told them conclusively that this reality is information-based. It's not matter-based. You can't get the right answer if you compute answers that are matter-based. Only information-based works. So they know it, but they don't know what to do with that. But they are willing to explore that idea that this is a virtual reality. They haven't yet hit on something that works for them, because all of the virtual reality theories start with some other physical place creating this virtual reality, like a physical place. And that's not the way it works. We're a creation of God, a creation of the larger consciousness system, so we can have experience, so we can make better choices based on love. That's why we're here. So it's been a long path for me over many, many years. I started down this path when I was in my middle 20s in graduate school, and now I'm 80, almost 81, and I'm still chugging on down the path, learning new things. As I go, there's always more to learn and more to become and more to be. But it's been a wonderful journey. I've met a lot of very wonderful people, and we are coming to a time in the history of the human race where we have an opportunity to take a big step forward. I mean, the human beings have been here roughly around 200,000 years. And in that 200,000 years, our evolution toward becoming love has been very, very slow. But it has picked up over the last 500 years or so, and we've made more progress in the last 500 years than we had in the whole 195,000 years before that. And we've made more progress in the last 100 years than we had in probably the 300 years before that. So it's accelerating. And now we get to a point where we are becoming a human family. A disaster someplace 100 years ago, or even 50, 60 years ago, was no big thing to all the people that live someplace else. It's like, well, I never even heard of that place. So 500,000 people died. Not my problem. We were all separate. We were not connected. And we've had bubbles of enlightenment everywhere. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said that this reality was maya, was illusion. And I agree with him completely. And so have many other deep thinkers come to that same conclusion. Okay. But now, if that earthquake or tidal wave happens, everybody in the world knows about it the next 24 hours. Everyone can look into the eyes of that child that lost everything. So now we just have to grow up to that situation and own it. And we are in a period of quickening. Over the next 2 or 3 decades, we will either make good choices and we will end up letting go of materialism, and we will embrace Instead, an ethic of love, of caring, of sharing, of cooperation, of compassion. That will be the ethic that goes with consciousness is fundamental. That's the ethic that naturally goes with consciousness is fundamental. So we have an opportunity to go there in just a few decades. And I think this ball will have to be started rolling by the physicists because, as you've heard, Donna, I call the physicists the high priests of Western culture because the high priests are the people who tell everybody else what to believe. Now the physicists are in that role. They tell everybody else what's the nature of reality. That's their job. And when the high priests realize that this is a virtual reality and that it's computed in consciousness and that consciousness for all practical purposes has all the same attributes as God, then that's going to be a big sea state change. Suddenly these ideas will go from in the margins where they are relegated to now and where religion has always been in the margins. Well, maybe not always, maybe back in the 1500s they were dominant, but current history they've been in the margins. Anyway, we will jump from the margins into the mainstream. And it won't take very long because people who live a life based on love prosper. They find that everything they need falls right at their feet as they need it, and that life is good and that they are happy and fulfilled. And it doesn't matter whether they're rich or poor. They find that life isn't about rich and poor. Life is not about stuff. It's about quality of consciousness, the quality of your choices. It's about the love that you express every day in hundreds of tiny ways. So that is a very important thing. We have this choice as humans. Now, if we make poor choices and we make choices toward fear, then we may put this possibility off for another century. Who knows how long it'll take us to turn around and go back the other direction. But I know for sure we will get there because though evolution is slow, very, very slow, because you have to change who you are. It's about a being. It's not about action. It's not about doing. It's about being. And to change yourself is a hard thing. So it's very, very slow to evolve consciousness, but evolution is also relentless. So even if it backs up, sooner or later, it'll turn around and go forward again. And we will eventually get there to this world that is based on love. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take us. We've got an opportunity to shorten that in the next couple of decades. The choices that we make will make a difference, whether we fall to the dystopia or to the utopia based on the quality of our choices. So that's why I think we're seeing a big resurgence in interest in consciousness, in the paranormal, and in spirituality. That resurgence was hungry for Neale's book. When he wrote that book and they said, oh, nobody will read it. You'll only get 500 people will read it. No, it didn't understand that now is the resurgence. This is the time that we have to grow up. And Neale and his book is part of making that happen, helping people see the bigger picture. My work is helping people see the bigger picture, and 1,000 other people's work is helping people see the bigger picture. And all of us together are trying to help get to this really turning point, this crucial point that's coming, that we have to make choices. Now, if we miss it, well, we'll get a chance to do it again. And if we miss that, we'll keep doing until we get there. But now is the first opportunity of humanity to take some big steps forward. So the system is kind of going all out to help do that. We're in this quickening toward an opportunity to make good choices, and the system would prefer that we make good choices and make this opportunity into one where we grow up as a species, as Homo sapiens. We grow up and realize it's not about the physical world. It's about spirit. It's about God. It's about helping other people. And in the boot, they get a better, more general physics that answers all kinds of the problems. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and how I got to the exact same place that Neale Donald Walsch got to.
It's so interesting, Tom.
Yeah, we have the same idea of what's going on here, just totally different ways of of getting there. And we both are basically working the same problem, how to get more and more people to realize that love is the answer. That's what we have to become. And the more people we can get to understand that, then the more quickly this evolution will take place. And all of us can live in that kind of a world.
I love that your conclusion is love is the answer. That's a wonderful conclusion from a physicist who's been working 50 years simultaneously with physics and consciousness exploration, that is your final conclusion. Love is the answer. You discovered that love and diversity is the nature of our reality and the nature of all alternate realities you've visited. So in your model, diversity is the key to learning and evolving towards love, which is, of course, low entropy in your science terms. And your proposal that in a few decades, control, power, and force will give way to a more loving, caring, cooperative
Yeah.
paradigm. So,
That's a strong possibility.
yeah, I think it is, with everything that everyone is contributing. So, Neale, what are your thoughts on the nature of reality, on love, diversity, and other realities Tom has visited? Have you visited other realms of consciousness and other realities? And if so, what did that experience teach you?
Everything that Tom just said.
How fabulous.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Tomorrow's God, which talks about
Yeah,
the next 30 years of humanity's experience as I anticipated. Let me back up just here a second, though, and say that I agree with Tom. I put it in one sentence. There's more going on here than meets the eye. Or as Bill said, I thought Bill put it perfectly when he wrote a line in one of his plays. The line was, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy."
yes. That's one of
Yes.
Tom's favorite. I
Yeah.
think he's put that in his book.
Yeah. Then also there's Plato and his analogy of the cave, that the real world isn't the world that we see. The real world is behind the world we see, the creator and the sustainer of the world we see. The shadows on the wall are just the physical reality that we think is the reality we live in, but it is not. And those people were called the idealists. They thought that something more fundamental than the physical world existed and was the source of the physical world. And that goes a long way back to Plato. And then, of course, Buddha had the same idea even earlier.
Now, you both teach communicating with God. That's a good thing, having a conversation, but you also mention be best friends with God. I think that's a wonderful message, especially coming from some of your comments on your books that God is more personal to them now. What would you say would be your best advice for how you communicate with God, Neale?
First of all, we have to believe that it's possible. So we have to embrace as a possibility that there is such an entity, if you please, that I call God. And number one, and number two, that we are actually able to communicate with God, that a conversation with God is in fact normal, not an exception. So that's the first piece of advice I would give. Then I would say, go to the second step in having a conversation with God, which is embracing your own worthiness. Even people who agree that there is a God, and that God does talk to human beings, they might think that, yeah, fair enough, as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, God maybe talks to the Archbishop of Canterbury or the chief ulama or the head rabbi or the Pope maybe, but not to the first baseman for the New York Yankees. I mean, come on. And not to just some weird guy up in Oregon, Neale Donald Walsch. I mean, give me a break. So we have to embrace our worthiness, that all of us are worthy to be spoken to by God or to receive the kind of information from life itself. Life is a process that explains life to life through the process of life itself, in my experience. It's just a question of opening your eyes, watching what's happening, looking deeply to see what could be made of it and why it's happening. And by the way, there is no reason why it's happening. Here's the great secret in my life. For the earliest part of my life, I looked for the secret. Why is such and such happening? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Finally, I asked God a few questions about that. I said, God, why is such and such a thing happening? And God would say, you tell me. And I said, no, you don't understand. You're supposed to be telling me. And God said, no, you don't understand. You're supposed to be telling me. I said, wait a minute, God, you're making me crazy. You're the one who's creating this all. God said to me, Neale, you're the one who's creating this all. I get that you think I'm creating this all, but in fact, you're the one, you and the billions of other sentient beings in the cosmos, not just those of you who are living on this particular place called the Earth, but you are creating this all. And I don't have any preference in the matter, which blew me away. I remember in my earlier remarks, I talked about how God said things that were such a contradiction with regard to what I was taught as a child. And when God said to me, Neale, sweetheart, I have no preference in the matter. I have a desire, but not something that I require. God said to me, Neale, never require what you desire. And I learned that, Donna, we're all adults here, so I'm going to use an adult example. But I learned that when I began to have sexual experiences with the lady of my loving choice. I learned that if I went to her with an attitude of something that I require, the game is over before I begin. But if I went to her with something that I desire, but not necessarily that I require, the game has just begun. Mm-hmm. And we're talking here about SEX, which God said to me, Neale, it's not just about what you consider to be sex. SEX is about synergistic energy exchange. It's about how you interact with each other. And so I learned that the second step was to be worthy of what I desire, but never to have it be something I require. A third step in having our own communication with God, in my experience, has been willingness. We go from possibility to worthiness to willingness. And I bring up willingness, Donna, because we have to be willing to struggle against, to move against, to become what I call idea heroes. Idea heroes are people who share and live into ideas that they hold about the world that very few people agree with at the present time. That only a minority of people currently agree with some of those ideas. So you have to be an idea hero. Like, to use a simple example, Galileo was a wonderful idea hero. He said in 1603 or 1623, somewhere in there, he said, you know what? The earth revolves around the sun. And of course, the church said, excuse me, we're going to condemn you. And they put him under house arrest for the rest of his life, because the church at that time taught that the sun revolved around the earth, because the earth was supposed to be God's greatest creation, and its inhabitants, the human beings, were supposed to be the highest, most evolved entities in the universe. So the church found that what Galileo was saying was a direct violation of its teaching. And so they put him under house arrest for the rest of his life. And they said they would release him if he simply rejected and denounced and stepped away from his teaching. Galileo said, sorry. The earth revolves around the sun. Now, it only took the Catholic Church 365 years to acknowledge that it was wrong and Galileo was right. But Galileo was just one of many idea heroes who have stepped forward and said, you know what? There's another way. There's a better way to do these many things. Gloria Steinem, a great idea hero. She actually had the nerve to say that if you don't have a penis, it's okay to make the same amount of money as those who do have one. If you're doing the same work at the same quality, but women should be paid the same amount as men. But when she first brought up the idea, it was, are you kidding me? Because there wasn't a corporation in the world that was paying its top executives the same amount of money, whether they were male or female. Now it's de rigueur. And there have been other people, of course, obviously, Martin Luther King Jr. and many other people who have stepped forward as idea heroes, saying things, daring to say. In 1963, I have a dream. I have a dream. All men are created equal. So you know what? Idea heroes is what I hear Tom talking about. He didn't use that particular phrase, but he's talking about people who are now stepping forward and embracing, announcing, declaring, defining, living into, demonstrating certain ideas that the largest number of people are not yet quite embracing, but will be, I believe. I join Tom in this belief. I believe within the next 25 or 30 years, they in fact will be embracing these ideas, even though currently they're the opposite of what our culture is telling us. So step 3 in having your own conversation with God is to embrace a willingness to step into the living of an idea that currently the largest number of people disagree with. If you say to people, I talk to God every day, they look at you like you're out of your mind. Mm-hmm. Unless there are people like Tom who will look at you and say, of course you are. I told you that 50 years ago. By the way, Tom and I are almost the same age. I'm 81, and I'm going to turn 82 in about 2 weeks. My 82nd birthday is in a couple of weeks. So I'm Tom's elder, so I expect to get the amount of respect that elders are due.
I'm just a couple of years behind you, but not much. I would like to bring up another subject, and it's something that's important in Tom's theory and also something that you might relate to. You mentioned in your books that you know Dr. Brian Weiss. I wonder if his work inspired you to pursue your past lives. Tom's MBT theory firmly relies on life experience packets, is what he calls reincarnation, as a necessary element to evolution. What would you like your roles to be if you were living another lifetime? What professions might you choose? And what is your awareness of past lives? And have you experienced anything as that?
Well, I certainly have. I can't say, even though I know Brian, I can't say that his writings opened the door for me to my past life experience. They simply confirmed for me that I wasn't out of my mind, that I wasn't crazy. So, I'm certain that I would have the same experience when I read Tom's writing. I would say, oh, so I'm not crazy after all, because here's a scientifically based explanation of what I'm experiencing, which is largely what I would call a spiritually based explanation. So he's done a wonderful job of bringing both worlds together. My first experience of past lives was not through Brian, but frankly, through my own movement through life. Stuff would happen. To give you one example, I'm in Copenhagen one day with my blessed, darling life partner, my wonderful wife. I'm there to give a lecture and to do a retreat. So, It's during the day. My lecture is that evening. So we're kind of like walking through Copenhagen. And I said to her, sweetheart, if we turn left at the next corner, about 2 blocks down on the right-hand side, it's going to be the most beautiful example of architecture you're ever going to want to see. A 2.5 or 3-story building with pillars in the front. She said, well, let's go. Let's take a look. So we turned left, we walked down the street, and sure enough, 2 blocks down, there was the building. And she looked at me and she said, how did you know? Have you been here before? I said, not in this lifetime, but I have been here before in a previous lifetime. I promise you. I can tell you things about this place that I have no way of knowing if I was limiting myself to what I have experienced in this particular incarnation. Before that time, and let me share with you one little kind of romantic little story, since I happen to bring up my wonderful life partner. When she first walked into the room, I didn't know her. My son actually was a friend of hers and brought her to a family gathering. She said, do you mind if I bring a friend? I said, no, of course not. So he brought this lady into the room. She came into the room. It was family night at our house. My children were there. I have 9 children. So they were all there. And we were having family night. He brings this lady, and as soon as she walked into the room, I went, here we go again. Oh my God, here we go again. We've done this dance before. And she told me later, not in that exact moment, but a few weeks later, she said we got to know each other a little bit better. And ultimately we started dating. And we dated for about a week, actually. We had dinner one night and went to the theater the next night. And we just enjoyed each other's company for a very short time, a week, or maybe it was 10 days, not more than that, 7 or 10 days. And in that little 10-day period, she said to me, I knew the minute I laid eyes on you that I've known you from before. But I didn't want to say anything like that because it would sound, I know some people would think that, what kind of a come-on statement is that? I've known you from a previous lifetime. But in fact, we both realized that we had spent previous lives together. Now, as we're driving down the road in the car talking about this, she looked at me and she said, we knew each other, I want to say intimately, to be adult about it, but we knew each other in an intimate way for about a week. We were only really, really close to each other for about 7 or 8 days. But she's in the passenger seat of the car and she looks at me and she said, I think we should be married again. And I looked at her and I said, you don't want to say that to me twice. She said, no, I'm serious. We have the same philosophies. We love the same food. We like the same music. We have the same ideas about life. We even love the same little recreational activities. We're both going to the theater. We love the theater. We're compatible in certain other intimate ways. Why wouldn't we be married? Why should we? What are we playing around with this for? And I just reached across the front seat of the car, shook her hand, and I said, done. We both wear the same ring. We both have the same ring on our finger. It has one word engraved out of silver on the ring. O-T-H-E-R. I put the ring on her finger and I said, you're my other. She put her ring on my finger and said, you're my other. There is really no other. There's only one of us.
Oh, how lovely.
I know, it's oh my gosh, and that's what we're talking about. And that's what Tom is talking about when he talks about love being the answer. And when we can give in to that, and not question it and not worry about it and not think, should I be moving this fast? Should I be getting married to a person we've only been close to each other for a week? Come on, what are you talking about? But we got on an airplane 2 days later and flew to Las Vegas, where you can get a wedding license in a half hour with no waiting period.
Yes.
Went to a wedding chapel, came out as man and wife. That was 17 years ago. 17 blessed years, because we found the God solution. I wrote a book called The God Solution, in which I said, you know what? People have been trying to define God for the past several million years. I can give you a two-word definition of God. It's called the God Solution. Here's the two-word definition. God is, in 2 words, pure love. And when I say that to an audience, somebody in the back of the room inevitably stands up and says, oh, Neale, come on. We've been listening to you for 20 minutes for you to tell us that God is love. I said, wait a minute, that's not what I said. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love. And my friend in the back of the room will say, all right, what's the difference? You say to him, my friend, the difference is that pure love needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us that way. And when you can turn to the person on the pillow next to you and say, I need, require, demand, and expect nothing in return. I don't love you because of what you can give me. I love you because of what I see over there. Whether I get any of it or not. I simply love you. I'm not loving me through you. I love you because of who you are. And you get to do that. You get to be who you are or not, as you wish. Every day of your life, as Bill said. I mean, he put it perfectly. To be or not to be. That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to rise up against the sea of troubles, and by opposing to end them, to die, to sleep, and to sleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. And the answer to that question is in a book called Home with God in a Life That Never Ends. The final of the 9 books in the Conversations with God series. Thank you for letting me go on and on and on.
Beautiful. Anytime you want to quote Shakespeare, I'm in.
That's been lovely. I like your quotes.
Good by me.
They're very, listen, I took a course in college in Shakespeare, and I think we had this book that was about that thick of all the writings that Shakespeare had ever done, and it was on real thin paper, so I don't know how many thousand pages it was, but that was one of my favorite courses in college.
I did not know that, Tom.
Yeah, that was delightful.
And I've had the pleasure of actually acting. Of course, I've been an actor. I've been a professional actor on stage and been paid as an actor for years. And I played Malvolio in Twelfth Night, and I played many Shakespearean characters. So it's not only to learn the wonderful words that he spoke and to memorize them, but to get in front of an audience of several hundred people and actually say the words again in a way that allows them to hear it sometimes for the first time.
Yes, indeed.
What was your favorite role, Neale?
Well, my favorite role of all time is going to be surprising to you because my favorite role of all time, I did a 2-year run as John Adams in the musical production of 1776. It's just an incredible stage vehicle about freedom, not just political freedom, but all sorts of freedom. And the whole point of the play is that we are free if we allow ourselves to be. That was my favorite role. I did a 2-year run in it. And I remember as my most wonderful, joyful out of 45 or 50 stage appearances I've made since I was 19 years old.
Oh, that's great because that spoke something to you. That resonated with you, that
Oh,
role.
did it ever? Did it ever? Yes.
What was your favorite Shakespearean role?
Hamlet, of course. Many, many years ago, as
Yes.
a young man, of course. I mean, much younger than I am now. But that was my favorite Shakespearean role.
Hmm.
And I had a wonderful experience. Yeah, I love the theater in every respect. I've done musicals, I've done dramas, I've done comedies.
Yeah.
My second favorite role in the theater was the old actor in a play called The Fantastics.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and I played the old actor. And at that time, I was not an older person, but they threw all sorts of makeup on me to make me look as old as I am now.
Okay.
And
Well,
I got
that's
out, I got
fantastic.
out, and I got a chance to play the old actor.
Oh,
And so I've had a wonder, and my third favorite role was I played a Michael in I Do, a musical based on the marriage. It's only a two-person show. It's a man and a woman the entire evening. I had a dinner theater production that I also did a 2-year run in. We did a 2-year run of I Do, and I played Michael in that 2-year run.
I
She and I,
remember that.
yeah, she and I just the two of us holding the whole audience. Part of that show was actually putting on makeup because it's about the beginning of a marriage, all the way to the time when they leave the house. He carries her in at the beginning of the show, and he carries her out of the house. He says, "Come on, Agnes, I'm going to carry you out of here." And he carries her out the same door he carried her in 35 or 40 years earlier. So during the show, when we're facing the audience, you're putting on makeup in front of the audience, making yourself look 10 years older, and then 10
Okay.
years older, and 10 years older, until you end the play, as a person who's like 73 or 74 years old, and you began at the age of 35. So it was just a,
Great
you know what?
experience.
I love the theater. I love the theater. It's a wonderful chance to communicate to people great truths of life.
Yes, yes. The Chronicles of Our Time. I remember that was popular, that particular play. So, now speaking of roles, if you were to do another lifetime, what would you like your roles to be and what profession might you choose? Both of you answer that one.
Tom gets to go first.
Well, as I see it, I would not be in that situation where it was my choice that I would get to choose. I mean, I could be in that situation, but if I take the last several incarnations into consideration, I suspect that there would be a job waiting for me, and I would be just thrilled to do and be whatever that was, and be perfectly happy with that. I don't have any need to make those choices. I would rather be put wherever it is I can do the most good and be
Yeah.
the most valuable as far as helping the system help us here to become love. So I don't think the last several incarnations that I have were kind of picked already for me. It wasn't, what would you like to do next? It was, we have a job for you. So that's
Yeah.
what I expect it will be next time as well. And not my choice. I would be the last person who would be competent to choose the larger consciousness system. Uh, God and Neale's lexicon is much wiser and more knowledgeable than I am, and I would let that choice be their choice, not my choice.
Bringing these messages to humanity has been your mission for
Yeah,
quite a long time. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
Several
consciousness
lifetimes.
works that way. As you evolve, you start when you just are a newcomer and you're a piece of consciousness that's just kind of starting for the first several times. it's basically hop in, hop out. You just need experience. You need diversity. You need to get in the game and get a sense of it. As you progress and evolve the quality of your consciousness, you get to the next stage where you can actually be helpful to other people and help them evolve. You can eventually become a teacher. Now, I don't mean a formal teacher where you get up and go to the chalkboard or lecture or something, but just you might just be a good example for people. You might be something that many people know or something just a few people know, but you help others grow. And then as you go through the process a little more, the assignments you get are always challenging because that's the whole point. You get challenged and you have to grow up to meet the challenge. You have to understand what your purpose is and go do it. So I would just take whatever assignment I get, and I would be just full of joy to take whatever that assignment is, whether it's being a good example or whether it's being just a good father. You know, that's a very important thing to be. So there's lots of places where you can make a difference. Not necessarily in front of tens of thousands of people, but you make a difference where you can. And you grow and you evolve and you become love and you share that love with others. And just as Donald said, love has to be unconditional. There are no conditions in love. You know, we hear people talk about unconditional love, but in my mind, that's the only kind of love there is. If there are conditions, it's not love. It's a deal, it's a contract. So that's where we're going to. So I don't think that I'm going to specify where I'd like to be and what I'd like to be doing. I'd be happy to serve wherever I get put, wherever I happen to land, even if that's just random. I would be happy to do whatever.
Just as an example that
Yeah,
other people could be
that can be
inspired
a
by.
powerful thing. There's been some very important people that just were good examples that kind of grew up in that process and were then eventually examples for the whole world, you know, like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi. There were a lot of people. And if you think who are the most powerful people that you can think of, and by powerful, I mean they made the biggest impact on the world. They actually changed the nature of the world, just one individual. And it would be those kind of people that I just named. They're very powerful. And what did they do? They just were love. They cared about people. They stood up to force. They, as Neale mentioned in the very beginning, you know, you have to have the courage to stand up and be love. And you don't have to make a big splash like that. There's
Yeah.
lots of roles for lots of people doing lots of things. And we don't make progress because of one or two people. We make progress because there's thousands of people pulling on the oars in the same general direction. Now, they may have a whole different cosmology. They may have a whole, set of beliefs, but everybody who's trying to move us toward becoming love is part of the solution. And, we have free will. We are who we are. Everyone has to grow up. They're doing the best they can with what they came in with, which was the quality of consciousness they earned in the last incarnation. And we just need to, if we can, help them take the next step. That is a big role and something to aspire to. And if we can do that in large groups, that's good. But even if you do that for just a few people, that's really good too. Everything helps and goes toward the solution. And I'll let the larger conscious system come up with the strategy of how that's all supposed to work. And I'll just play my bit part as best I can.
Nice. Neale, were you ever aware of being a help to humanity in any past life, or what would you like to do in a future life?
What I would like to do in a future life is be a living, breathing, complete expression and full demonstration of what I've been given to share in this lifetime. I'm sorry to say that I'm not that now. Not even close, frankly. I'm not a person who walks his talk. Not at the level that I wish I was, or frankly, as I just said, even close to it. Or as my children like to say to me, one of my sons frequently says to me, "Dad, read your books."
No. Well, I think you may
But
be being very humble about that, but
no,
that's
so what I want to
interesting.
do in my next lifetime is I want to be a living, breathing expression, a full demonstration of what I was given to bring through in this particular lifetime, so that I could know myself as that,
Yes.
not just talk a good game, but actually live it from moment to moment. Because right now, I talk a good game. Oh, yeah. As I said earlier, I spent 15 years in broadcasting. I've been in front of audiences. I've been in front of, I had an audience of like 8,000 people in Florida a couple of years ago who came to hear me give a lecture. And I thought, okay, wow, all right, wow. And the first thing I said to those 8,000 people is, I hope you didn't come here expecting to find a human being who is living into what I've been given to share. Hello, my name is Neale Donald Walsch, and I'm not my book. If you think that I am a living representation of my book, go to the box office and get your money back, because I'm not that. But am I yearning to move closer to it? So at least what's different for me now than 35 years ago is that at least now I know the path that I'm on. Tom was mentioning some things about that a while ago. I didn't know the path that I was even on. I had no idea what I was doing here. I had no idea what I was doing here. So at least now I know the path that I'm on. Have I gotten to home plate yet? Have I rounded third and I'm going to home? No. I haven't hit a home run yet. I haven't knocked it out of the park. But what do I want to be in my next lifetime? A guy who knocks it out of the park.
That would be lovely. For each of you, what are the most challenging blocks to spiritual growth? In Tom's model, this growth is not a belief-based work as it is with your work. It's not belief-based. The buck stops here. This sign was on President Harry Truman's Oval Office desk. For each of you, what are the most challenging blocks to spiritual growth?
For me, it's the thought that I am this, that I'm my body. And it's my ego, frankly. Ego is a wonderful acronym. It's a great abbreviation, EGO, edging God out.
Mm.
And so my biggest challenge is to stop edging God out, to actually live into, as I mentioned a moment ago, what it is I've been brought to share. So that's my biggest block, is my thought that I'm not only that I am this, but my second part of that is that not only am I this, but I am this and you are that. You are not me. But when I see Donna as part of me, when I look at you on my screen and say, there goes another part of who I am, appearing a bit different, but in no substantial way any different at all. It's just another aspect of who I am. And when I can feel about you the way I feel about me on my good days, and not on my bad days, then I think that I would have gotten to the place that I've overcome my blockage. So my block is my belief in separation, which I'm dropping by the hour, and my belief that I'm a body and not simply a spiritual entity having a body and having a mind.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you. Tom?
Well, I would agree that in general, if we're talking about the thing that blocks most people, then I would agree that the block is fear, which creates ego, and fear and ego together create belief. You should always be open-minded, but you should always be skeptical. That Neale said it very, very well. For myself, I think the challenge that I see, of course, is always to walk the talk. That's something you have to do. That's the point. That's why you're here. That's your reason for being here, is to learn how to better walk the talk. First, I guess you have to understand the talk, and then you have to understand that you have to be it, not just talk about it. But I think the biggest challenge that I have is communicating these truths, these ideas to people in a way that they understand. It's, knowledge and understanding is a wonderful thing, but shared knowledge and understanding is so much better. And trying to share something that is so completely outside of the average person's understanding. And as Neale said, it's, you grow up in this culture and you find out that reality is not like that at all. It's very, very different than what you believed and what you were told, what you learned at church, what you learned at school. And being able to explain that and express it in a way that it's understood is a challenge. It's a very hard thing to do to help people, or a very hard thing to do to help people see a new paradigm. That's a difficult thing. And I've been getting better at it as time goes on. Sometimes I look at some of my old videos and kind of cringe a little bit because I've gotten a lot better at expressing these things in ways that people can get to them. But it's still, I find it very, very difficult to get people to understand me in the short time block that I'm usually given to create that understanding. Okay, you've got an hour. Oh, you've got 40 minutes to give a talk and then another 20 minutes for questions. And when you have time blocks like that, that's your opportunity to make people wonder, to give people a sense of, oh, I'd like to find out more about this. And it's a difficult thing when you're talking to an audience of, hundreds of people. Every one of them has a different place that you need to take them for them to understand. But you have to talk to all 100 of them all at the same time and trying to say the right thing and not say the wrong thing. Because if you say it in the wrong way, you'll do just the opposite. You'll push people farther away from that understanding. So that's a big responsibility and one that I struggle with all the time, how to best do that. And of course, I've learned that the best thing to do is stop thinking about it, stop planning it, stop getting your intellect involved in the process, and just go do it. Because when it just flows from the heart and you're just talking from your experience, then you're much more credible and believable than if you're trying intellectually to get a point across. So that's been sort of the learning that I've been doing. If you look at some of my first talks, I was trying real hard with the intellect to put together a story that would be real credible. And now I don't do that. I just talk and make it up as I go and be authentic and speak from the heart and just let it flow in a way that meets the needs of the people out there. So I have to assess those people, what they're thinking, how they're feeling, how are they reacting to what I'm saying. And I get all that information as I talk, and then I'll adjust my talk to fit the people that are there. So that's been my challenge and difficulty in doing all of this. And of course, that's the difficulty now. When I was first trying to put together the concepts that would allow me to describe both physics and metaphysics and, the paranormal and the normal all of that to understand the intuitive as well as the intellect, then I had a lot of things to learn. I was a babe in the woods at that point, and I had everything to learn, but I've been doing this a very long time. I've been on this path for a very long time, and slowly it sinks in, and slowly you become more of what you understand. And it's just a slow, slow process. And from the things that Neale has said, I think he's probably further along in this process than he gives himself credit for. I think he's a very humble person because he wouldn't have the ideas he has if he wasn't in a large measure walking the talk. Oh, yes, we all have room to grow. We all have room to do better, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a wonderful thing to have good relationships with other people. It's a wonderful thing to have that significant other, as he described it. You can just be who you are. Just be natural. Just be you, and find that that works better than trying to be who you think that other person would like you to be. That's a disaster. It's much better just to be exactly who you are. Say what you feel. Say what you think. Just be. And you allow that other person to just be, unless he says you just love them because that's a gift you give, not because you expect anything to come back from it. And that is a very learning experience. I mention that because when you get in those kinds of relationships, you learn a lot faster. You begin to see that when you stop controlling and stop the intellect from trying to make a plan and telling you what you should do, and just be who you are and interact, then you find that everything's easier, everything works better, and just love and let everything else fall out as it does. And the magic is that it'll fall out magnificently without you trying to control it or manipulate it or optimize it or anything. You just be who you are. So I've been trying to approach my talks that way as well, without trying to figure out what I should say and what I need to tell them. The hardest thing is, what do you say when you've only got 20 minutes? What do you say when you've only got an hour or even only got 2 hours? To say it all would take all day, and nobody can sit still that long, and it would be inhuman to ask them to sit and listen that long. So it's a challenging process, but I'm glad that I don't have to do it by myself. I'm glad that there are people like Neale and again, thousands of others who are also helping, pull this thing we call humanity, toward love. And I think it's all going to come together very nicely. And I think the system is out there right now trying to help create the environment that will allow it to happen in the next 2 to 3 decades, just as Neale said. And that's why he's doing what he's doing. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and a lot of other people as well. And we all pull on the oars in the same direction, and we'll get there. It has a good probability. The system has been working on this for a long time. It's not like it just woke up yesterday and says, oh, look, humanity has a chance here to make a big step. It's the system has been aware of who we are and what we are and how we're evolving, and has been helping us and nudging us here and nudging us there and giving us prophets like Neale who explain, what the purpose of our life is. And it's a plan. And I think over the next 3 decades, that plan is going to come together, or it's going to have to reset. And my bet is on that it's going to come together. I think we're going to end up in a much better space in about 30 years. And I think it's funny that Neale and I both come up to that same time schedule, probably for totally different reasons, but we both come up to around that same time schedule. And the reason it's going to be a tumultuous time is that when you have a lot of change and shifting your paradigm from this is a physical reality to reality is the larger consciousness system. Consciousness is reality, and you're just a piece of that, and everybody else is a piece of it. And you're not better or worse than any of those other pieces. You're just different. And you need to work on being as good as you can be. But once to wrap people's head around that transition, that paradigm shift is a very difficult thing. And when you have that much change in a short period of time, you're going to have turmoil. You're going to have dysfunction. You're going to have disruption because when everybody's happy and feeling good, nobody learns anything. We tend to learn from pain, unfortunately. Now, as we grow up, that changes, but when you're at a not a very high quality of consciousness, you tend to only learn from pain. So a lot of people have a lot of pain before they start growing up. And that's partly what we're going to be going through over the next 3 decades, where it's not going to be easy and it's probably not going to be fun for a lot of people, but I think it will take us where we need to go. Sometimes you have to take a few steps backward before you can take, 4 or 5 steps forward. So that is going to work out however it does, and each of us just has to do the best we can to do our part, and it'll all be fine.
I think you were right when you said there's a hunger out there for something better. I think the experience of this current state of the world is something that will probably propel us a little further than we
Yeah.
might have expected. Here's a challenge. Do you have one simple message for those who have never heard of your work? And can you do that one simple message in a couple of minutes? Neale.
Well, I've already done that, but I'm going to revisit it because I've been asked this question before. My one simple message is, frankly, I got to say I've got two. My first simple message is God's most important message to us. You've got me all wrong. I was on the Today Show, and Matt Lauer, Matt Lauer turns to the audience. He says, well, folks, here's a man who claims to be talking to God. Neale, what's God's most important message to the world? Oh, and by the way, if you could put it in one paragraph, it would really help us because I have about 30 seconds left. And I thought to myself, you stinker, you would ask me the biggest question of all time when you had 30 seconds left. So, I didn't have the answer prepared. But then literally it came to me on the set. And I looked at him and I said, I can give you God's message to the world in 5 words. God's most important message. He said, all right. And he looks at the camera with a little smirk on his face. He says, ladies and gentlemen, from the man who claims to be talking to God, God's message to the world in 5 words. Neale? And I turned to the camera and I said, God's message in 5 words? You've got me all wrong. Then I turned to Matt and I said, now, Matt, if that message is inaccurate, the discussion has ended. If that message is accurate, our discussion has just begun. Don't you dare ask anyone else a question like that when you have 30 seconds left.
Did you really say that?
Yes.
Yeah,
well, I gave you more than 30 seconds now.
He didn't know where to go with it. He said he broke for a commercial. Well, folks,
Yeah.
when they break for a commercial, you're in trouble.
Yeah. And I was off the show. So I've done Oprah, I've done Larry King, I've done the Today Show, I've done all the major national television shows, and they all asked me the same. But let me repeat what I think is the second most important message to the world. I mentioned it about an hour ago. Here it is again. Guys, write this down. Your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you live into that awareness, you see that at a universal sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. There's only one of us in the room.
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautifully
really
put.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that Neale and I have had so many very similar experiences. I also was put on the, you know, on the spot by a guy who was a radio host. And I was on this radio program and I was telling him a little bit of my theory. And he says, well, Tom, Einstein took all of his work and theory and he condensed it into one simple expression, E equals mc squared. Can you take all of your work and represent it in a simple statement like that? I said, I have even a simpler equation, and that is that R equals I. Reality is information. And that was it. And he did the same thing. He only had, that was the end. That was like, we have 30 seconds before this is the end. And that was his last question to me. And I had the same experience, and it came to me what to say. Information, of course, is experience. Experience is why we're here. And we have experience in multiple realities, in what we call the physical reality, the dream reality, and daydream reality. We get all kinds of information, but it all boils down to just what Neale said. What's important is how much you lower the entropy of the system, and you're part of that system. We're all one. It's how much you become love. That's the key. Love is not about you. Love is about other. It's how are you helpful? How do you serve? What can you give? Those are the important things. And love is always about other. Fear is about self. Ego is about self. But love is about other. So yes, how you interact, all the other lives you touch, all the people you meet, all the choices you make, all the things you say, even the little things. We are the sum total of all the choices we've made. That's who we are. And it's not a very pretty sight when you look out there, in the land and say, well, what you see is that's what we are. That's just an accurate summary of the quality of consciousness of humanity. It's exactly what you see out there. But that's the way evolution works, one small step at a time. And now perhaps we'll have a chance to take some bigger steps, not tiny little baby steps. But, if I had to give just one thought to people, I'd say that, or some advice, I guess, to people. It wouldn't be just one poignant sentence, but just a little advice. I would tell them, most of us spend our lives and our energy and our attention on trying to manipulate life and others around us to be the way we want them to be. We want our spouse to be the way we want our spouse to be. We want our children to be the way we want our children to be. We want our boss to be the way we want him to be, to give us a raise. We want people to like us. We want people to do things for us. And we have this energy on trying to make things come out the way we want it to be. And that is all backwards. That's putting your energy in a place that is not helpful. Instead, it's much better to just let things happen as they do. And what's important isn't really so much of what happens. It's how you deal with what happens. That is important. Those are your choices. And by those choices, you'll evolve or de-evolve the quality of your consciousness. Or in Neale's world, you will raise the quality of your spirituality. You will become closer to being love or further away from it. So instead of putting all that effort to, get others to be the way you want, you should just be yourself. Think about what you can do and how what you do will affect other people, and then try to optimize that effect toward positivity. You want to have the most positive effect on everything and everybody. And that's not just the people, that's also the dogs and the cats, the horses and the forests. You have to think of all of it. What is it that you can do that optimizes all the people you come in contact with? And then you won't really know. You'll say, well, I could do it this way or that way. Which one's optimal? I don't know. How do you come up with that equation of what's the low entropy path? Well, you never know for sure. but you give it your best effort, your due diligence to think about it. Then you make a decision and you make your choice. Now, once you've made a choice, that choice can turn out to be a good one or a bad one. It's not important so much exactly how it turns out as it is that you learn from how it turns out. So you make that choice, and now you have to stay aware of how did that choice work out? Who did it hurt? Who did it help? How, in a big picture of things, including the system and all the people you interact with, how did that choice play out? Was it good? Could you have done better? And if you could have, how? And why didn't you understand that in the first place? How did you miss it? So the thing is, there's no penalty for doing it wrong. We don't have a crystal ball that tells us how the future is going to work out and how everybody's entropy is going to be lowered because of your choice. So you do the best you can with being thoughtful and caring. You make your choice, and then you learn from it. If you make a poor choice, there's really no penalty there. You just have to make it again. That's your penalty. If you don't do it right now, you get to do it right later. But you make your choice and you learn from it. Now, if you don't learn from it, that's a problem. That you got it wrong when you were trying to do it right, not a problem. So don't be hung up in, I don't know the right thing to do. I don't know the right choice to make. Which one's the low entropy choice? Which one's the love choice? Just do your best. Think about it. Do it and learn from it. That's the nature of our reality. That's how you win the game. Eventually, as you learn from all those choices, you'll become wiser and more grown up, less fear, less ego, less belief, and you will prosper in that way if you always look back and learn from everything. Learn from things others do. Learn from everything you do. So it's being aware, not putting your effort into trying to manipulate things to be the way you want them, but just accepting them as they come, making your best choice, and learning. So that's a little lesson, if you will, how to go through life, how to optimize your growth, how to grow up more quickly. You just have to stay aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how that works out, and learn from it. 80 years later, you'll be doing fine.
This interview has been enlightening, fun, and such a privilege. And I thank you very much, both of you.
Yes, I agree. I've felt privileged having to be here with Neale. He's a great soul who undervalues how much he walks the talk.
Thank you so much.
That's very sweet to say, Tom. Your check is in the mail.
This has been great fun. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Neale.
Thank you, Neale, for coming
both.
here.
I've enjoyed being with you. Thank you both. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Okay, bye.